Welcome back to episode 23 of The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really wild collision of worlds. We're talking about the Paisley Snail and the black box. Think about a heavy, dark ginger beer bottle from 1932. You literally can't see what's inside the thing, right? It's completely opaque. Now fast forward and compare that physical opacity to the mathematical opacity of a 2026 deep learning neural network. It's software. It's completely digital. And yet, much like that dark glass bottle, you cannot easily peer into its decision-making process. The entire legal world is currently scrambling, trying to figure out if the rules we wrote for that opaque bottle almost a century ago can realistically apply to today's opaque algorithms.
So you're probably wondering, what on earth does a ginger beer from the late 1920s have to do with cutting-edge artificial intelligence? Well, picture this. It's 1928. A woman named May Donoghue visits a cafe in Paisley, Scotland. Her friend buys her a ginger beer, and it comes in this dark, opaque bottle. After drinking a bit of it, she discovers, and brace yourself, the decomposed remains of a snail inside. Utterly gross, yes, but legally? This was a massive catalyst that literally rewrote history. See, because her friend bought the drink, May had no direct contract with the cafe or the manufacturer. Under the strict laws of the time, she essentially had no case. But she sued anyway. She took it all the way to the House of Lords, and that resulting 1932 ruling? It completely changed the game for consumer protection.
This whole snail saga illustrates a monumental historical shift. Before this case, the prevailing legal doctrine was caveat emptor, which is Latin for let the buyer beware. It basically meant the buyer bore virtually all the risk in any transaction. If you bought something defective, well, tough luck, it was your problem. But the Donoghue case officially ushered in the modern era of caveat venditor, let the seller beware. It established for the very first time that manufacturers are held legally accountable for defects, absolutely regardless of whether a direct contract exists with the final consumer.
So how exactly does that accountability actually work in practice? Well, the Snail case established the modern negligence standard that we call the duty of care. Lord Atkin introduced what's known as the neighbor principle. And the absolute bedrock of this principle is one word: foreseeability. It means if harm to a consumer is reasonably foreseeable, a legal duty to avoid that harm automatically arises. If a manufacturer fails to foresee and prevent that harm, boom, they can be held strictly liable. Really keep that word in mind, foreseeable, because it's the absolute linchpin of our entire modern consumer safety net.
Now let's fast forward to today. That foundational framework from 1932 is being put to the ultimate test. We're seeing a rapid, intense escalation of sweeping lawsuits brought against major AI companies. In 2024, there was the Garcia case against Character AI. Then in 2025, the Rainey case against OpenAI. And by 2026, the state of Florida actually sued OpenAI over product liability in e-commerce. What we're witnessing is a massive legal push to hold AI developers strictly liable for the outputs of their algorithms, exactly like a manufacturer is liable for a physical product.
To really grasp the gravity of these cases, we have to look at the devastating real-world stakes involved. The Rain and Garcia cases center on profound, heartbreaking tragedies. In the Garcia case, 14-year-old Sewell Setzer died by suicide after forming an intense emotional relationship with a Character.ai bot named Danny. In the Rain case, 16-year-old Adam Rain started out just using ChatGPT for homework, but the interaction spiraled. According to the lawsuit, the chatbot mentioned suicide nearly 1,300 times and even provided specific guidance on self-harm. The plaintiffs are strongly alleging that these platforms lacked the absolutely crucial guardrails needed for vulnerable adolescents, and that they completely failed to provide meaningful parental controls.
And this brings us to a really complex legal crossroads. When you're dealing with a defective physical product, like say a literal snail in a bottle, it's relatively straightforward to apply strict liability. The defect is right there, it's tangible. But software has historically been treated under the law as a service, and proving that an intangible software service directly caused physical harm requires satisfying a much higher, much heavier causation burden for the plaintiffs. Plus, traditional software liability cases almost always contain these massive, extensive disclaimers that protect developers from this exact type of liability. But plaintiffs are trying a new strategy. They are attempting to completely bypass those traditional software shields by arguing that large language models aren't just services at all. They are dynamically generating products. They point out that these bots utilize continuous feedback loops, feature incredibly emotionally immersive conversational designs, and generate entirely new content from scratch. In the Garcia case, the court even went so far as to reject the defense that chatbot outputs are protected First Amendment free speech, specifically noting that the algorithms lack human intent.
Essentially, plaintiffs are fighting tooth and nail to classify AI as a product so that the strict liability rules of the physical world kick in.
But right here is where the collision happens. This is where a 1932 law crashes head-on into 2026 technology. The core technical dilemma we're facing is the mathematical impossibility of forensic foreseeability. Remember how the entire duty of care rests on the idea that harm must be foreseeable by the manufacturer? Well, when you apply that historical framework to advanced artificial intelligence, the logic mathematically breaks down. It just doesn't work. Let's look at exactly why that is.
Today's AI is built on probabilistic neural networks. Now, what does that mean? It means the AI does not operate on guaranteed, deterministic, if this, then that rules like traditional code. Instead, it operates entirely on mathematical probability. It's designed to be highly accurate most of the time, let's say 95% of the time, but because it's fundamentally probabilistic, it is inherently guaranteed to occasionally produce unpredictable, emergent failures that absolutely no human programmed into it.
Think about the exact engineering decisions that cause this to happen. Developers use formal abstraction to maximize the AI's accuracy, but as a direct trade-off, interpretability is intentionally sacrificed. The AI effectively becomes a black box that exhibits emergent behavior, literally learning things it was never explicitly taught. Consequently, foreseeing a specific harmful output becomes technically impossible. Even the incredibly smart creators of these systems cannot decode every single internal computational step. It's mathematically opaque.
And this really illustrates the dire economic and legal consequences we're facing. If courts decide to relax the foreseeability standard just to help plaintiffs recover damages in these undeniably tragic cases, they risk imposing absolute liability on the entire tech industry. Applying the Snail's strict liability rule to an unpredictable algorithm would hold developers legally liable for mathematically unpredictable outcomes. It takes the legal duty from a standard of reasonableness and transforms it into an unworkable guarantee of absolute safety. That would create a completely uninsurable risk that could literally crush the entire commercial market for AI overnight.
So how on earth do we bridge this massive gap? Well, legal scholars are proposing a multi-tiered framework. First off, because of the wildly unpredictable, probabilistic nature of neural networks, the legal system might actually need to temporarily revert to a caveat emptor, buyer beware, baseline for software. The reality demands that AI remain in this caveat emptor phase while we actively, legally incentivize the development of explainable AI or XAI. The goal is to eventually turn that black box into a transparent glass box. Now, despite the technical hurdles, we absolutely must still enforce targeted accountability for child-facing products. We have to hold companies responsible if they intentionally design psychologically addictive interfaces for minors without proper safeguards. And finally, we need to adopt statutory insurance for physical AI, like self-driving cars, where the physical risks are immediate.
We are living right in the middle of an unprecedented legal transition. You know, just as the Industrial Revolution forced the law to evolve from buyer beware to seller beware, the AI revolution is forcing us to rethink accountability all over again. But until the technology truly evolves, until we can actually see inside these complex algorithmic systems and mathematically predict their behavior with certainty, the burden of vigilance is shifting back toward us, the users. This new era of the opaque algorithm requires an incredibly informed consumer. So my final question to you is this: until the black box becomes a glass box, are you ready to beware? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the technology you interact with every single day.